stability for every family. And then we guarantee for anyone underemployed, as this woman seems to be, or unemployed, we guarantee their job training to get a higher paying job, because we want more people to earn at their highest capacity, their highest skill level, and earn as much as they can. And so if you guarantee job training for anyone who's underemployed or unemployed, you could revolutionize the economy within months.
Got it. Well, I'd like to open these questions up to the rest of our panel. We have another question coming in from an audience member, Lisa from Vermont, who is a bartender, server, and cook. This shutdown of where I worked came into effect March 17th, 2020. I'm a single mom and a widow. This is financially devastating for me and my son, as it is for so many more. I have applied for any help I could receive at this time, and I will not be able to claim unemployment, as they say I didn't make enough in the second quarter, which is absolutely ridiculous. People need help now. And so to our panel, Lisa asks, how can we make sure that people aren't in this situation again?
Yeah, hi, Emily. These questions are actually coming from workers who've applied for relief to our fund. So I wanted to give a little bit of background first on the issue, on the campaign, and on the fund that we've started that's the source of these questions, and then let the workers and employers who are on the panel do a little bit of introduction before we get back to the question, if that's okay. So just a little bit of background on the issue. So One Fair Wage has been fighting to raise the minimum wage for service workers across this country now for almost a decade. There are, as I mentioned, almost 14 million restaurant workers in America. Almost 10 million of them lost their jobs due to coronavirus. And unfortunately, what we're seeing is that the vast majority, we're looking at about 60 to 65% of those workers are ineligible, are being denied unemployment insurance. And most of them, our research is showing, is because the states are telling them that their sub-minimum wage plus tips is too low to meet the minimum threshold to qualify for unemployment insurance. So I want to take a minute to look at what is this sub-minimum wage, because we've been talking about it but not really explained it. What is this sub-minimum wage that so many people are on that's causing this horrible disqualification? So as I said, the restaurant industry is one of the largest and fastest growing industries, but it has had the lowest wages forever, in large part because of the money, power, and influence of a trade lobby called the National Restaurant Association. We call it the other NRA. It represents the chains, the IHOPs, the Denny's, the Applebee's. It's been around, unfortunately, for a very long time. In fact, since emancipation of slavery, when it first demanded the right to hire newly freed slaves, not pay them anything, and have them live entirely on tips. And that was made law in 1938 as part of the New Deal, when everybody got the right to the minimum wage for the first time, except for groups of Black workers, domestic workers, farm workers, and tipped restaurant workers who were given a $0 wage at the time and told, you get $0 from as long as tips bring you to the full minimum wage. And we went from zero in 1938 as a sub-minimum wage for tipped workers all the way up to $2.13 an hour, which is the current federal minimum wage for tipped workers in the United States of America in 2020. And 43 states continue with this sub-minimum wage, including blue states like New York and Massachusetts and DC, all have sub-minimum wages. And it's a legacy of slavery. And it was always an issue because 7 of those workers were women, 40% were single moms. Most were working in casual restaurants like IHOP and Denny's, struggling to get by and struggling with the highest rates of sexual harassment of any industry, because they were having to put up with all kinds of inappropriate behavior to feed their families and tips. That situation, which we had been fighting to change, and actually we won the issue in the US House of Representatives in July of last year. They passed the Raise the Wage Act, which called for a full minimum wage with tips on top for the first time since emancipation. We were making progress in many states, and then coronavirus happened. And coronavirus really, as we've been talking about, laid bare, exposed that the system of paying people $2 and $3 and forcing them to live off of tips never worked in place. There are 7 states that got rid of this system many decades ago, including California, Oregon, Washington, Nevada, Minnesota, Montana, and Alaska. They all require full minimum wage with tips on top. If you think about it, workers in those states, servers, bartenders, bussers, they're getting unemployment insurance right now, measured on a full minimum wage of $15 plus tips, while their counterparts, the same workers with the same occupations, are making about 1/3 of that in unemployment in states across the country. And it's resulted in enormous amounts of poverty, starvation, and you're going to hear some of those stories today. But that is why we created the OFW, Unfair Wage Emergency Relief Fund, because we knew these workers were already struggling and were not going to be able to make it on unemployment insurance measured on a $2 wage plus tips. And thankfully, the world responded. We've raised $20.5 million to hand out in cash relief to thousands of workers. Over 100,000 workers have applied for relief. And we've given already out about $3 million out in cash payments to workers. But what's incredible, even more incredible, is that opportunity to get cash relief out to workers has created the opportunity to bring workers together in gatherings like this, to say enough is enough, to share their stories like the ones you're reading, Emily, and the ones we're going to hear from Charles and Tabina, and to know that we must have change. We must #reimagine. And what's so amazing is that you're going to hear from employers that we've even been working with employers to figure out ways to get them relief in ways that actually change the industry, because we know we can't go back to $2.
I want to actually bring up one very immediate story that we had from Tiffany in New York. She and her boyfriend got laid off hours apart from each other. They both work in the restaurant business. He hadn't been working long enough to apply for unemployment, so he's getting nothing. She's eligible to apply, but as we all know, the unemployment application system in New York has been overwhelmed. So they are down to eating cans of fruit and vegetables just to get by. They're going to food pantries, but now they don't even have enough gas to get to a food pantry, and they don't know what they're going to do. So can we talk about the fund you described and other emergency resources for the senator who might be able to illuminate how can we get people food and emergency help now?
Well, you want to go ahead, Senator? We have a program that we want to let one of our speakers talk about that's actually getting food relief out to workers, but I don't know, Senator, if you'd like to go first.
Sure. So what we can do in my office is link you to services. If you're in New York City, there's a lot of food banks, not-for-profits, and relief organizations that are working 24/7 that can actually deliver meals to people, especially people who are sick, homebound, don't have transportation. I talk to the not-for-profits daily, and one of the ones I talked to last week is called In God's Love We Deliver, and they are delivering food to homes. And they could deliver more to more people if they had more delivery people who are willing to deliver, because it's very dangerous work. You're going into a home and you're delivering it at their doorstep, and it's different than the way it used to be, where people would always go and collect it themselves. So there are organizations that will help you, but I'd love to hear from Saru what she's doing specifically. If you want specific help from my office, my team responds to emails, and if you just send it to casework@gillibrand.senate.gov, casework@gillibrand.senate.gov, and we can help you. We can literally navigate what's available and where you live and how to get food, resources, and support in this time of need.
Great. Yeah, we've launched today a really exciting program with Governor Newsom in California that hopefully is going to get replicated in New York and other places, called High Road Kitchens, where we provided a combination of public and private dollars to restaurants to rehire workers, repurpose themselves as community kitchens, feeding thousands of people. But they get the cash if they commit to higher wages and greater equity next year. So it's an opportunity to not only rehire and feed people, but really support those restaurants that agree with us that we need to #reimagine the industry. So we want to let Elisa say more about that when we get to her.
Yes, I definitely want to hear from Charles and Tabina and Elisa. And so I'd like to turn to introduce Charles Almanza. Charles is a diehard lifer of the restaurant industry. His first experience of working in food service was as a child. And after arriving here as a refugee from Nicaragua, his mother opened up a small catering company with some other local women out of a van in Long Beach, California. So Charles' first job outside the home was as a busser. And from there, he moved up to being a bartender. And for the last decade, he's worked in an array of establishments, from hotel bars to dive bars. For the last 6 years, living and bartending in Bushwick, Brooklyn. He says that he's doing his life's work. He has a deep love for the restaurant industry, but also believes that there are aspects of it that need change. So Charles has handedly encountered various forms of wage theft and harassment from employers, and in the face of that, he's worked to demand accountability. So Charles, I'd like to ask you, what happened to your current job when the pandemic hit?
The job that I was at just recently. So I was bartending at a bar in Bushwick, and unfortunately it closed because Governor Cuomo and enforced that all bars, I think it was on a Monday or Tuesday, to close because of social distancing. But I was it was a real struggle to get unemployment. They decided, the bar owners that I had, they decided that closing would be better for all of the employees involved, so that we could actually apply for unemployment. And that was a whole kerfuffle and a half. I think I spent maybe 3 or 4 days just on the phone, like 8 hours a day, trying to get through. And when I finally got through for unemployment, they take it was supposed to be an average for the last like 18 months of all the wages that you have made. But last year I worked at a bar in Brooklyn where the employer didn't pay us a wage at all. They made us live completely on our tips. I worked 70-hour weeks, and when you work so much, it's nearly impossible to look for another job. I know a lot of people say, oh, like if you've worked like that much and you didn't get paid, why didn't you look for another job? Like, can you imagine working 6 or 7 days a week, 70 hours a week? It was pretty brutal, especially if you're living paycheck to paycheck. So last year I was starting with eviction. I was worried about being homeless. I remember feeding my cats like rice and beans because that's all I could afford. They're healthy now, thank God. But like the sad part is that like I'm not alone in this struggle. Wage theft is pretty common, and because of the sub minimum wage for tipped workers, a lot of employers don't see that wage is important, even though it's illegal to just not pay people. And so because of that whole experience that I had last year, when I finally got an employment, I ended up getting half of what the maximum was, because on paper it looks like I only made $5,000, which were just my credit card tips for like the 6 or 7 months that I was there. So, you know, I guess that's my most recent experience.
I'm not an employment lawyer, but I hear so many issues around that. And it seems worth noting that all of your cash tips were basically didn't count at all in that calculation. It was just all gone.
Yeah. I mean, they didn't keep a record of the cash tips. Yeah. So
Charles,
I made a lot.
I was going to say, what's your plan? How are you going to get through the next few weeks?
I've not been drinking coffee. I'm joking. You just kind of take it day by day. I ended up getting unemployment. And thankfully, the House and the Senate passed the CARES Act, which allows for, if you're getting unemployment insurance, you get an additional $600 per week on top of what you get. So, thankfully, I've been able to pay rent the last 2 months, but other people aren't as fortunate as I am. I think about like all the the bussers or the dishwashers, a lot of people in the back of house who may or may not be documented, or may not be working under the table, who aren't as fortunate to get through the hell of applying for unemployment and actually getting pennies to the dollar, which is what a lot of us are getting. So it's a really unfortunate situation, and I think that there's a reason why we're all here, because this industry is something that I love. As you mentioned, I grew up in this industry. I want to, even in spite of coronavirus, I actually want to open up my own bar in the future. This is my life's work. This is my favorite industry, even if it feels cruel and broken at times. And I think that one of the ways that we can make it better is by having one fair wage.
Fantastic. Thank you for walking us through that. I really, really appreciate it. I want to turn to one of our guests who's kind of has a very different perspective and different positionality with relation to this issue. Dan Simons is the owner of Founding Farmers, which is a farmer-owned business. It's owned by over 47,000 family farmer members of the North Dakota Farmers Union. And he's worked to turn restaurant locations into meal and grocery safe delivery services, including household goods that enabled Founding Farmers to rehire hundreds of employees ahead of schedule, essentially working as emergency first responders in this crisis. And he also set up a relief fund for employees who lost their jobs and has guaranteed each worker free meals. Dan, can you talk about what inspired you to set up this relief fund for your employees?
You know, March 16th, we laid off 1,100 people. And, that might sound like one data point on, one page, but it's not a data point. It's one story of one person and their family over 1,000 times, right? It's not one data point on one page. It's 1,100 chapters in a book. That's pretty scary. And so I didn't know what we would do with the company and how we would survive, but we said to our staff, you're all laid off. We hope it's temporary, but at least we're going to commit to providing you free food every single day until we can get you back. And obviously, once we can get people back, our staff always got free food when they were working. And so we just knew we had to really lean into this situation. You can buckle under the pressure or you can lean into the fight. And it probably would have been safer and easier for me to just close our business and hunker down. But I do believe that restaurants are essential workers. And so it's a lot of motivation when you commit to people and you realize you might be their only source of food. And so
Dan, are you also serving as a community kitchen?
We are not exactly under kind of Jose Andres's banner, if that's the thing, although we are in contact with World Central Kitchen. And so, yeah, we've been donating thousands of meals, some of which we're able to just take, the cash comes into the business and we spend it on meals. And other ways we're taking donations in from our customers that still can afford stuff and turning that right around to meals for first responders and healthcare
And who's
workers.
delivering the meals, or are they coming to you to get them?
We have rehired staff. So we laid off 1,100 and we've rehired over 250 so far. And so we've turned servers into delivery folks.
Yep.
And we've got workplace safety at the highest possible threshold that we could figure out how to do. And it's contactless delivery.
And did you partner with any of the not-for-profits, any of the food banks or the?
Yeah, so we're working with Feed the Fight and several organizations based in DC where we're able to collaborate. They bring some resources or some nonprofit funding, which we turn into food and then do the delivery.
Great. You're in Brooklyn, or where are you located?
I'm in Washington, DC.
you're in
What I
DC.
saw pretty quickly, if we could do our own delivery, I could pay people $15 an hour and give them a stipend for their transportation costs, right? Gas or wear and tear, and not use a tip model. And it's been really effective.
That's great, because we're trying to replicate that in New York City. We've been working with a number of the food banks, trying to pair them with restaurateurs like yourself, who are willing to turn their restaurants into community kitchens to feed the first responders and to feed homebound seniors or homebound sick people. And so far we're having some good success, but it takes time, and we need restaurant owners like you who are willing to support their workers. One of the challenges that in God's Love We Deliver, they said that they are getting enough donations to have the food to actually deliver to more people, but they don't have enough delivery personnel. They don't have the infrastructure to get the delivery out. So to the extent you've had some success in building that model, I'd request that you call them, reach out to them specifically and tell them what's working for you to give them guidance, because they can make more meals and they can deliver more meals. Their challenge is just having enough delivery personnel because it's so dangerous. But if you figured out a way to do it in a way that your workers feel safe and feel compensated, you might be able to just share that model with them.
Absolutely. And I can share what we're doing with workplace safety, how we're using PPE, how we use the
Yep.
technology to keep all the payment contactless, the GoTab software that we use for routing. And, I'd love to see some of the government money come into small independent restaurants to help us create jobs and feed the community
Yeah,
rather
exactly.
than just going to the typical huge corporate
Right.
contract
And
provider.
it's the small restaurateurs that want to do this. Like, so for example, we have a food bank in New York, and there's a major food bank in Rochester, Syracuse, Buffalo, Albany, New York City, Westchester, Long Island. And they're major food banks, but very few of them are paired with community kitchens so far. And so they haven't been able to turn their produce and what they have into meals. Our dairy farms are unable to deliver milk to typical customers such as schools and restaurants. And so we're trying to create a pipeline right now legislatively so we can take the farmers, compare them with food banks and community kitchens. So there's a streamline. So instead of dumping milk, we've literally had dairy farms. One dairy farm had to dump something like 12 truckloads of milk. Think what you could have done with 12 truckloads of milk. You could have done real good things. And even some of our fruits and vegetable growers had to not pick their fruit and vegetables because they didn't have workers. Because there's so many challenges in the food supply chain right now. And so I'm writing legislation right now to try to streamline that. And we're trying anecdotally to make pairings in New York right now with not-for-profits plus farmers plus restaurateurs.
And
And
Jill,
it's still going, but I heard what you're doing, Saru, in California, which is exactly what we're doing. We're pairing 1-to-1, and it's slow because it's 1-to-1.
Yeah, no, we're doing it at a bit more scale statewide in California, and we've gotten procurement contracts for senior feeding and all of that for these high road kitchens. But I think the key difference between the program we launched today in California and what we're hoping to do in New York and a lot of the other feeding programs is that the cash relief that we're offering to restaurants to be part of the program is predicated on the willingness to change employment practices in 2021. Go to higher wages, go to one fair wage, and go to equitable practices next year. And we've raised a bunch of philanthropic dollars to pair with the public dollars, I'm sorry, so it's a true public-private partnership to actually provide cash to restaurants called high road kitchens that commit to these standards. So I did want to, because these things are really important, but I do want to continue to push through our relief efforts, whether it's feeding or community kitchens. We do want to not just feed people now, we want to change the industry going forward. We want to reimagine the industry going forward. And so that's why, at least with our program, the relief efforts are really predicated on restaurants being willing to make changes. And I really want to thank Dan because we've been having this conversation for the last month. We were previously on opposite sides of a table over this issue of the sub minimum wage. And I feel like over the last month, we've really aligned and listened to each other and come together. And that's the new openness we're seeing in the industry is people are willing to open as community kitchens, but even beyond that, people are willing to actually make change with regard to wages going forward.
I want to talk a little bit about the change that people are seeing and feeling or not seeing and feeling on the ground versus what folks are trying to do in the sort of policy sphere. And I want to turn to Tabina to talk about that. Tabina Gibson has been a bartender for many years in Chicago. She is a tipped worker and she's a mom of 4 who was denied unemployment benefits because she earned the sub minimum wage. It's again that same problem of not being able to show an earned wage that qualifies you for unemployment benefits. So Tabina, I know that you are many states away from the senator's jurisdiction, but I did want to ask you to share from your experience, you're living and breathing this every day on the ground. And I want you to tell us what you want the senator and folks in Washington to know about what you're experiencing.
Well, currently, like Charles, my experience is I'm not getting any income. So I have 4 children. I have also a granddaughter with cerebral palsy that I take care of. So it's kind of hard Like it's emotional for me to talk about it because there's like no one to help. But also, I have been dealing with it. Um, when going to unemployment, I on the computer hours at a time. I went into the office and said for hours. And at the end of the day, it still was the same thing. Oh, there's nothing we can do for you. So I did appeal. So I am waiting on my appeal. Um, what we can reimagine, I feel that we should have not only after this pandemic is over, we should be allowed not only to have one fair wage, but we should also be entitled to health benefits. Um, if we can't get health benefits, we should have something that at least helps us to get health benefits. Like we should be discounted. Okay, you work for trips, we can give you a discount for that. It's just so overwhelming and so much. But I don't think, again, I should be penalized for being a supplemental worker. That I love the food industry. I think food is the way to be in friends, be in family. I like cooking. To have my family come over and I cook big dinners. And we all sit around. It's just I brought my son up in the food industry. He works as a prep cook. He started off as a dishwasher. He's a prep cook now. He loves the food industry. It's just I just think food and drinks are the heart of any community. So us as workers and servers, bartenders, we are the heart of whatever restaurant there is, small businesses. The servers and the bartenders, we are what brings everyone together. And I just think we should have a lot of things that should go differently. And people don't feel that we should be able to have that when I don't understand why. When we are the soul of most bars, most restaurants, it's the servers and the bartenders. We put in our feelings, it comes from the heart. You cook from the soul. You bartend from the soul. To be a bartender, you have to be a social person. You have to be really able to deal with people in a social environment, whether it's a hostile environment or a calm environment. You have to learn how to adjust and readjust. And we should get paid for that. Because we're some people counselors. They come to us with their problems. So we're their counselors. We're their shoulder to lean on. We're their eyes when they don't see they've had too much to drink. We know how to cut them off and talk to them calmly, make sure they get home safe. We take on more than role of just serving drinks. We don't just serve drinks. We have people too. And I think all hospitality workers should deserve a pay a one fair wage.
We agree with you. Thank you for your testimony.
I'm sorry for the tears, you guys, but I just get so emotional.
It's emotional. We're going through a crisis, and your words matter, and your testimony and experience matter to us, and that's why we're trying to change the policies.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Tabina.
I'm really excited to have you two talking directly to each other. I feel like that's such a it's a good route. We talked about polling at the beginning of this session, but much more powerful sometimes than the numbers are the stories. And even the kids in the background who sound like they're having a really good time.
Yeah, that's what my house sounds like
Yes,
too.
baby shark.
So we have one more guest on the call who I definitely want to introduce and have a chance to engage with here. Elisa Liu. Elisa Liu is the owner and executive chef of Elisa's Love Bites, also in Bushwick, Brooklyn, which is a healthy bakery that prides itself on giving employees living wages. She is a leader of the Restaurants Advancing Industry Standards in Employment, RAISE, an association of over 800 restaurants committed to sustainable wages and working conditions for their employees. And she recently co-authored a letter to Governor Cuomo calling for one fair wage, paid sick leave, which we just talked about a minute ago, and expanded healthcare access, in fact, for restaurant workers. So, Elisa, I really want to know how you've done it. You're a leader here. You're forging the path for people who want to pay their workers a fair wage and provide the right kind of, livelihood and benefits for somebody to actually raise a family and sustain themselves. How did you do it? And how did that impact your restaurant? Do we have Elisa here?
She's not talking on mute. Elisa, you have to unmute yourself.
Okay, am I unmuted now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Sorry about that. So, I just want to say we're no longer in Bushwick. We were in the process of moving to a new store in Manhattan, and crazy enough, we signed the lease long before the pandemic. But of course, the lease started right when everything started to get crazy. And then on top of that, I got sick with COVID-19 as well. So it was about 2 weeks of hell, but I'm okay now, thankfully. And now that we're trying to have the new store open, it's been really difficult because it's really hard for my contractor to get everything he needs. So basically, we don't have a store right now. And even though we would be able to operate as an essential business, we're not able to operate because we don't have a space right now. So because of that, a lot of people in the industry, we've been talking about how the hell we're gonna get back from this, how we're gonna survive, how are we gonna reopen if we can have 25 to 50% occupancy, how the hell are we gonna make money that way? So what we're realizing is we cannot go back to the same way we were doing business before. Excuse me, we were doing business before because it was not sustainable. It was totally inadequate for ourselves as owners and for our employees. So the way it was before, people were getting paid sub-minimum wages and depending on tips. And now that there's no way to get tips, people are not making any money at all. And they're not even, like we've seen, they're not even entitled to unemployment in a lot of cases. So we cannot go back to that. And we cannot go back to devaluing the real cost of what it takes to run a restaurant, to make the food that we make, to serve it, and to employ people. So we haven't been charging what it really costs to make all this food that we're selling. So that's something that needs to change. And we also need to change the way we treat our employees. They deserve to not only get by on a week by week basis and to hopefully make rent and, maybe buy some food, maybe pay some bills. They deserve to thrive and do well. And we deserve that too, because as an employer, one bad week can ruin your business. And our business model was not sustainable. It never was. So now we're seeing more of an openness from people who usually oppose what we're trying to do. We've been fighting for one fair wage for a long time. And a lot of people called us crazy and they called us a bunch of other things that I won't say because we're live. But now those same people, like you see with Dan, are more open to saying, hey, the way we're doing things wasn't working. So we really need to come together and figure out how we're going to reimagine the industry if we hope to be able to survive.
So we're almost at an hour, but I want to take a minute to thank each of our guests for coming here and sharing something that I sort of see as the true reimagining of this industry and of the livelihoods of hundreds of thousands, if not millions, I think millions, Sarah will correct me, it's millions of workers across the country. I hope that what Elisa said about changing perspectives as it's reflected in our polling is something that's going to trickle up to leaders like Mitch McConnell, who need to get on board with protecting these millions of workers. I would encourage each of our viewers to go online, to use that hashtag reimagine, and give us your best shot, show us your vision of the future. Because out of this crisis, we have the chance to build something really exciting. So we look forward to seeing your hashtags, your views, and making stories like these trend. And we want to thank the Senator, Saru, Dan, Elisa, Tabina, and Charles for joining us here today. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
God bless everybody, and thank you for sharing those stories. And thank you
God
for
bless
the
you all
extraordinary
too.
work you're doing in each community. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Senator.
Bye.